This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success Podcast.
I can see the sunrise sneaking above the canyon, feeling my heart with happiness. Though my horse not lonely, that's the start of life's journey, even when things are looking down.
That's a band called The Golden Dawn with their song called Let the Sunshine In. And I thought that song was the perfect muse for today's topic, because today we're going to be talking about how to let go of anger. And when I listen to that song, I hear kind of the lightness and easiness that comes when you have a peaceful heart, in contrast to how you feel when you are holding on to anger. We all know. It's ruminating. It wakes you up in the middle of the night, can't stop thinking about it, and having these kind of dark, painful, angering thoughts. And I know that this is a pain point for a lot of people. I've been hearing about it in your questions. I've gotten a number of questions for listeners of our podcast lately on this subject. We've been seeing comments come through on our blog, and also people reaching out for personal help with this. And so I thought I would address it more extensively on today's episode of the podcast. I hope that if you have been harboring a grudge or feeling angry about something that happened that feels unresolved, I hope that today's episode will help you get some clarity about some steps that you can start taking today to begin not just letting it go, but really moving past it and starting to feel like yourself again. So that's what we're up to today. And hey, if this is your first time listening to the show, I'm so glad you've found us. And if this is not your first time listening to the show, I'm glad you're back. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. My background is as a psychologist, marriage and family therapist, certified life coach, and I'm the clinical director of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching, where we specialize in helping you create love, happiness, and success. And this podcast is kind of an extension of that. I mean, our whole practice is a labor of love. Everybody on my team, including myself, we do this because we love it. And I was actually doing some reflecting the other day. A recent podcast episode, I talked about ways of cultivating authentic happiness. And one of the little assignments that I had for you guys was buy a lottery ticket and imagine what you would do if you won the lottery. And, after I wrapped up that podcast and was going about my business, I was reflecting on the fact that if I won the lottery, I would still be doing this. I would still be sitting right here talking to you probably about this exact same topic, because I do this because I love it. It is so personally important to me to be a helpful force in the life of others. And that's why I do these podcasts. And the fact that you are here with me listening to this is just the reason why I do it. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you also if you have been one of the many that's been getting in touch with comments and questions. I appreciate them. We look at all of them. And I have been attempting to answer all of the comments and questions that we're seeing on growingself.com personally. So if you've left a question there, you might want to glance back and see if I've had the opportunity to write back to you. And so listen, we're going to jump into our topic, but just really lastly, the only reason, again, that this podcast exists is to help people. And if you listen to this show or any others and think to yourself, yourself, man, you know what? My brother-in-law really needs to hear this. Go ahead and forward it. Share it to other people that you think could benefit from hearing these words. And also, you can help people that you have not met and never will find this show by leaving us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Again, this is not a commercial endeavor. This is really just putting information out into the world and hoping that it helps people. And your contribution to the show is making it easier for other people to stumble across it. So thank you in advance for considering leaving us a review. And then, very lastly, if you have a question for us, you're welcome to get in touch through growingself.com, our website. You can also get in touch through Facebook.com/Dr. Lisa Bobby. And I am officially in the Instagram pool. I am a late adopter, but I'm getting there. So I have been making it a point to link to every single thing that I'm putting out on Instagram. You can connect with me there at Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby and certainly ask your questions. But if you want to see everything that's coming out from Growing Self, because it's a lot more than just I'm doing, please follow Growing Self on Instagram. It's growing_self. And in addition to these podcasts, you'll get pinged every time when an article comes out on our blog. We have so much good stuff. Oh my goodness. One of my colleagues, Dory, she is a sex therapist. She's joined me on the show before, but she just posted a magnificent article addressing the subject of what to do when you don't want to be touched, like romantically. You know that feeling? I'm actually going to get her on the show to talk more about that, because I think that's actually a fairly common experience for people in relationships from time to time. Just like, nope, don't feel it whenever their partner approaches them. So anyway, I promise we'll get her in here to talk about that. But in the meantime, if you are following Growing Self on Instagram, you would have known that already. So follow Growing Self or check that article out on our blog at Growing Self. And all right, that's everything. That's everything for me. So now let's talk about you. And let's talk about this anger thing for the purpose, not of stoking it, not of growing it or coddling it, but for the purpose of examining it with the intention of being able to release it. Because anger is one of those emotions that, like every emotion, it has light and dark. It is not bad. It is not good. It is neutral. And while anger in its light and helpful version can be extremely positive, honestly, in our lives, there are times when anger can really get in the way of us being feeling good or being our best selves or having the kind of relationships that we want to have or being able to move forward. And so this podcast is all about that. And it actually emerged as a topic that I wanted to address for me because, in addition to seeing questions come through, I actually had a talk with a client who had lived through a really regrettable situation with a family member. I will not go into details, but, high level, there was a really nasty argument that to the point where it became physical, and they had already had a strained relationship with many layers of, hurtful things that have happened over the years. But this was kind of the icing on top, right? And so we met and we talked about the situation, and he handled it beautifully. I mean, in the moment, he behaved as appropriately as anyone could have. And after the fact, he was very clear on what he wanted to do and being able to set boundaries and protect himself going forward. And so, all that was resolved. Nothing else to talk about. But there was still this anger that would come up. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we've all had it when you experience yourself as being hurt by someone or victimized by someone. and there is not resolution. We don't get justice in the moment, right? It's sort of like this open-ended thing. That anger can fester. And his question was, how do I stop feeling angry about it? Like, it happened. I know that it is not currently happening, and yet I still feel like it is happening. That anger is alive. It is alive. And, that's, I think, a beautiful way of illuminating anger in its, most helpful and unhelpful forms. Anger is a very protective and instructive emotion. We need anger. It is good for us to feel angry sometimes, because anger is this signal that I have been hurt, violated, perpetrated against. I'm being treated unfairly. I am being harmed. And so it's this big surge of energy that comes up that says, I need to protect myself. I need to, either get away or cut this person off or fight back. And there's a lot of energy, like physiological energy, that comes along with anger, because it energizes us for the purpose of self-defense and self-protection. And also, paying attention to anger and allowing yourself to be angry is a marvelous source of information, because when we're okay with our anger, we can legitimize our anger and say, you know what, that was messed up, and this is what I need to do going forward. Because I am in contact with this anger, I know that I need to set limits with this person, or not be their friend or their partner anymore. This is not a safe person for me. And so what do I need to do to add layers of protection between myself and them so that they can't do this to me again? And so we certainly don't want to get rid of anger. Anger can also be extremely motivating. I mean, when we're really in touch with our anger, it can allow us to make changes and do very hard things that we would not have otherwise been able to. So, hooray for anger. Now, on the other side of that, anger can also become problematic and limiting when it is anger that's related to things that have happened in the past and that are not going to find further resolution. Like no further action is required. You know what you need to do. You have embraced all the lessons that anger has to offer, and yet you are still having these feelings, and they are, oftentimes intrusive feelings, intrusive thoughts and feelings that are getting in the way of you being your happy little self, just bopping along. You know what I mean? And so when anger happens, it's often attached to a few different scenarios that we typically see here in our practice at Growing Self. With life coaching clients and therapy clients, they sometimes, that's why they get into this work, is because they really feel like they have unfinished emotional business with the past. They have memories or thoughts about things that are kind of flaring up in situations in the present that are not necessarily connected to what happened in the past. So, a great example is someone who may have had, regrettable things happen with their family of origin or with a friend in the past or a partner in the past. And they got through it, and that might have even been years ago, but now they find themselves getting angry or, truthfully feeling threatened in their current relationships. And so they are now with someone who is a perfectly safe, nice person who means them no harm, and yet they are experiencing kind of, neutral or sort of normal relational things. They are experiencing these big feelings of threat and anger, and they're kind of making associations, even subconsciously, about things that have happened in the past. But it's very real. It's not just in their head. I mean, they're having very real feelings, and they are acting on those feelings in their relationships in the present. So that Perhaps situations with their current partner are becoming, very tense or turning into a fight because they're having this big emotional reaction to things that is really beyond what am I trying to say? Out of proportion with the actual events in the current moment. And that is something that we see really often, both with individual clients or, not uncommonly. I mean, when people come in for couples counseling and, we're fighting and this is going on, when we start unpeeling that onion, it is really not uncommon at all for one or sometimes both of partners to, start giving voice to painful experiences and memories in the past that kind of feel like they're bleeding over into the present moment and impacting their current relationship. And so then that can oftentimes become the focus for a little while in couples work, so that people have the opportunity to do that work of healing with their partner and then can move on into the future without having that either flare up or not flare up to the degree, or when it does flare up, for both people to say, okay, I know what that is now, and so we don't have to fight about it, but this is what's going on. Even just the ability to recognize it and attend to it can be very, very helpful for couples. So another situation where we often see anger is when people have experienced difficult life events and even outside of their relational experiences, they are having kind of intrusive thoughts and angry feelings just when they're kind of sitting around minding their own business, like nothing is necessarily happening. But from time to time, they'll just get these just flashes or thoughts in their head, or just sort of memories around something that happened and feel impacted by it. And I know we can all relate to this. I mean, myself, I've lived through things where people have done crappy things to me. And there's always that period afterwards where it's like, oh, that wasn't right, but what do we do with that in the moment? And the reason why, though, it does need to be attended to is because it doesn't necessarily get better with time. Unfinished emotional business doesn't sort of, dissolve after a certain period of time. What actually happens is that it develops a candy coating that it's almost kind of protected and enshrined, and it becomes kind of bigger and its own thing. And everyone needs the opportunity to just talk through it and make peace with it and have that sense of closure and completion. And it is also not often, I would say, possible to get that closure and completion and recognition with a person that wronged you when it's, an individual thing. Couples who come in where there has been relational trauma in their relationship is a different animal. We'll talk about that too. But so it's very important for individuals to have some strategies for working through that category of anger. And it's also really important because in addition to being annoying, also anger is something that does have a documented and fairly significant impact on not just your emotional health or your mental state, but also your physical health. Remember we talked at the beginning about how anger is very physiologically activating. It's really like an intense form of this biologically based fight or flight response. And when we go into fight or flight response, it changes a lot of things in our bodies on a physical level. And for good reasons, going back to the idea that it's protective. Anger leads to changes in, our heart rate, our respiration, the way our body is circulating blood and stress hormones and digestion. All of the biological resources we have get mobilized to this really kind of protective stance. And when any of us are living in a persistent state of anger, with things that have been unresolved, that are coming up inside of us over and over and over again. You know, if it happens for a day or 3 weeks, like we're more resilient than that. But when people are living in this sort of internal simmering broth of unresolved anger for months or even years on end, it can really begin to take a toll in terms of our immune functioning, in terms of other biological processes related to the way we sleep or the way we metabolize energy. And it can create health problems down the road, in addition to making you feel like crap. So for that reason, holding on to anger for longer than is necessary is harmful to you, in addition to your relationships. Now, furthermore, another common kind of anger we see is anger after infidelity. This is a big one. You know, many couples come in, goodness, we see couples for all kinds of reasons here at Growing Self. And honestly, I am on a mission personally to get couples in well before their relationships deteriorate to this point. And there's something that I try to drive home over and over and over again. It's that healthy, successful couples do couples counseling and engage in things to strengthen their relationship while things are still really fundamentally okay. You know, that way you keep your relationship strong and keep it from deteriorating to the point where truly regrettable things can happen, such as infidelity. However, some people, unlike you, do not listen to this podcast and get that memo. And so by the time they reach out for couples counseling, they are, you know, at potentially the end of their relationship. I mean, terrible things have happened. There's been betrayal. There's been, you know, relational trauma. There's been lying. It's been awful. And it's also very common that with these couples, there are layers and layers and layers of anger that need to be worked through as they work towards healing their relationship. You know, I did a podcast a while ago that really talks about how to heal from infidelity, that kind of talks about all of the different stages that couples have to go through to get there. If this is part of your own life experience and you haven't listened to that podcast yet, go back and listen to it, because I talk at length about, you know, all of the different stages. But that anger stage is a really important one. And there's often, you know, anger on both sides of that dynamic, but frequently the person who has been betrayed, who has been the one cheated on, is enormously angry. There is rage there. And we often need to spend a long time in couples counseling helping them process that rage, helping them do something constructive with it, helping their partner understand the degree to which they have been hurt in order for them to be able to move past it. And prior to their working through that anger, it is often very difficult for them to behave in such a way that repairs their relationship. They are not ready to be nice and say please and thank you and, you know, express affection. They need to go through this angry phase. And so that is something we also frequently see. And one other one that we see commonly is people in a persistent state of anger after a really bad divorce or bad breakup. You know, we do a lot of breakup recovery counseling and coaching here too. And I would say that, I think I've done a podcast on this too, kind of the stages of healing after a breakup. But, you know, most people in the early stages, they go through this phase where there's just this sort of obsessive thinking about their partner and idealization of the partner and doing anything to get the partner back, and which is normal. You know, there's this biologically primed kind of freak out response to reconnect with your person. And when people are able to heal past that that point and start doing the deeper layers of healing and growth that come after a bad breakup or divorce, they oftentimes go through a very, very angry stage, angry at their ex, angry at the experiences that they sustained throughout the relationship, and also sometimes even anger at themselves, Again, as you've probably heard me talk about on this show, it's not uncommon for relationships. They're spiraling down for a long time before they actually end. And in retrospect, sometimes I would say frequently even, people who are going through a bad breakup or a divorce, they've seen it coming, and perhaps they weren't fully aware of the degree to which their partner was unhappy. And in retrospect, as they kind of comb through, they can see fork in the road moments when maybe they could have done something a little bit differently to potentially mend the marriage. Or, and I think this is really common too, people can sometimes be very angry with themselves for not getting out of that crappy situation sooner. When they've kind of moved past that super hyper addicted to the relationship phase. I know this was my experience when I went through my terrible breakup when I was a young person. I did go through a period where I was like, what was I thinking? How could I have allowed myself to be treated that way for such a long period of time, and feeling angry with myself for betraying myself. And so I think that is also something that, we frequently hear about in our breakup recovery counseling. So anger. It takes many, many forms. I'm sure there are many other kinds of anger that I, didn't even touch upon, but these are the most typical flavors of anger that we see here in our practice. And I wanted to just sort of acknowledge all of those because over the last, little while, we've received questions about every single kind of anger. And so I wanted to acknowledge, shout out all of those different kinds of anger that you might have questions about. And so let's dive in now to how to actually let it go. And this is one of these ones where I'm going to be telling you sharing with you some recommendations for things that you can do to help yourself in this process. But also my disclaimer is that anger, especially if it's big and especially if it's been around for a while, is one of these things that is actually harder to work through using like a self-help model. I will certainly provide you with some information that will be useful and that you can use. And anger is it's not an event, it's a process. And this is something that many people need to connect with a professional to really work through, because the process of working through anger is not knowledge-based. I'm going to say that again. Anger is not affected by knowledge. I am not going to give you a nugget of information that will flip off the anger light switch. It doesn't work that way. Anger is a feeling, and not just a feeling, but a fairly primal feeling that is connected to life experiences. Anger is generated through experience, and anger is healed through experience. So the true path to working through anger is an experiential one, where you are having experiences in this new present moment that help you activate and then process the anger. And it's hard to do that on your own because it is a interactive experiential thing. So you having a conversation with a therapist or a coach or your partner or a marriage counselor for the purpose of kind of working through it productively with someone who can walk you through some of these steps and exercises that I'm sharing is truly the path. And so the reason why I just wanted to say that is because I'm always so, cautious and about saying, conquer anger in 3 simple steps, right? I mean, I see that kind of self-help advice all over the place. It's, be perfect in 5 easy steps. And I always am like, yeah, really? And not that people don't have good advice and useful tips. And I hope some of the tips that I share with you will be useful. But I worry sometimes that people with good intentions, myself included, are offering advice that isn't the whole story, and that when people take the advice and aren't able to resolve their anger in 3 simple steps, they feel worse about themselves. They feel like they're doing something wrong. They feel like there's no hope for them. They feel like they screwed it up, or this stuff helps everybody else but it didn't help me, therefore I am unhelpable. And it can go into all kinds of different directions. And so that is my big disclaimer, is that I'm going to give you information, but there's more. There's more here. And I believe that you deserve to have healing experiences as well as information. So please take this as it's intended, which is, one part of a more comprehensive healing experience that you get. So anyway, I should make you sign a waiver, but there, I've said it. So now, when it comes to resolving anger in any of its forms, the key to really genuinely moving past anger and not just bottling it, or trying not to be angry or not allowing yourself to feel angry, but really authentically working through anger, is walking in to that anger and being able to give that anger a voice, telling the story about what happened and how hurtful it was to you and why it was not okay that happened, and allowing yourself to be justifiably angry, to validate that, legitimize it, have it make perfect sense, and be completely understandable. That is the first step of healing from anger. And I think because, we've been socialized away from valuing anger, particularly, no, I was about to say particularly women, but that's not true. There are an awful lot of men who have very negative associations with anger too. So every time people start to make contact with these feelings, they shut themselves right down. They don't allow themselves to go there. They can talk themselves out of it. And that really impedes the healing process. And at the same time, it can also be very possible to walk into anger and go into that place where you're justifying it, you're kind of reliving the story, and then that's also where it ends and you get stuck there. You don't have tools to kind of keep moving through it. So while the first step is to walk into anger, let me give you the second step, because we got to keep going. We have to move into the story, feel it, but then also find some new things. There needs to be some plot twists. There needs to be any combination of compassion, justice, atonement, or forgiveness. Any one of those things can be the exit door for you to move past anger. So let's talk about that a little bit, one at a time. First of all, compassion. This is hard to do, and when we get stuck in unproductive anger, we're often so busy being mad or wishing that the person who harmed us would get struck by a meteor, sort of wishing for justice, that it can be difficult to move into a place of genuine compassion. And in my experience, when people behave badly, when they mistreat others, when they mistreat themselves, when they make harmful decisions, it's often coming from a place of their own wounding, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Hurt people hurt people. And so when you can move into the story, connect with anger, and then also slide into a place where you're able to develop a more compassionate narrative, either for the person who harmed you or for yourself, if you feel that you have been harming yourself and you're angry with yourself for that. And really being able to step back and look at the context of their life experience, the things that they may have lived through, the things that they needed that they didn't get, the way that they may have been harmed by others in the past, or if it's someone who is really genuinely irredeemable, compassion for them, in that they are going to repeat these patterns over and over and over again until they really get help and do the work that you are on the path of doing. At the core of all forgiveness, I think, is compassion, and being able to find compassion is something that will immediately help the things that you have experienced not be different, but begin to feel different. So that's one strategy that you might consider. Now, another strategy that works on a psychological level is walking into the anger, letting yourself feel it, and then also finding a way experientially to feel that there has been some kind of justice. And this might not be literal justice. I mean, people that hurt you might not be going to jail or having any consequences. But if you can create a new narrative for the situation where you identify consequences that they may or may not know that they have experienced, there can be a quelling of the anger for you, because even if you weren't able to defend yourself or protect yourself, knowing that on some level justice has been served to them can be enormously healing. And again, this might not be literal justice. This might be karmic justice or spiritual justice. I don't know what your belief system is, but I think one of my opinions is that why, humans always seem to have some form of spirituality in every human culture across history is because there's almost always a justice component of that is baked into belief systems. So consider that. Another way of releasing anger and working through it is to find atonement. This may or may not be possible with the person that harmed you. However, if you are currently in a relationship where there has been betrayal or where there has been hurt, if you connect with a good couples counselor who's able to help both of you stay in this space for you to talk in a very deep and intimate way about what happened and how you felt and why it hurt you, and also support your partner in not just hearing the words, but really feeling the impact of their actions on you, and having them be able to move in a place of genuine remorse and atonement, really being able to hear you and acknowledge the pain that was caused. That can be a very, very powerful and effective way of moving through anger and resolving anger in a relationship. I will also say that is very hard to do outside of working with a trained professional. Usually when people try to do that on their own, it turns into a lot of defensiveness and denial and excuses on the other side, which only makes things worse. So I'm just going to throw that out there. That's another disclaimer. But that atonement, that being heard, if you cannot tell the person who hurt you directly. Another fantastic way of beginning to get to some of that is by writing them a letter that you may or may not ever send, but to put it all down, to them. That can be very powerful. Similarly, many times, in counseling and in coaching, we invite our clients to talk to their person that they're mad at. We imagine them in a very visceral way being in the room with us and saying out loud the things that they have been hurt by, or wounded by. It can be very healing. It can be with a counselor or a coach. Personal story. I had someone do some really ethically questionable things to me in a business arrangement that we had, and I felt that I had been really betrayed and wronged by them. And I stomped around for a while and ruminated and thought about ways that I could get justice and tried to get to compassion and really struggled. And I actually I have an attorney, and I told my attorney the story of what happened, and she was very sympathetic and didn't I was like, wait a minute, who's the shrink here? And listened to the story, and we talked about options, and in the end decided to let it go. But the punchline is that at the end of really simply telling her the story and forwarding her all of the evidence that I had to support everything, and having my experience validated and acknowledged, no further action was required. I emotionally felt 100 pounds lighter and could just really let it go. And since then have been able to arrive in a place of compassion and forgiveness might be pushing it a little bit, but some compassion. But giving yourself the opportunity to share that story in a way that it validates your experience and gives you the opportunity to give that pain a voice and have it acknowledged at the very least is extremely powerful. Now, the last thing that can help for working through anger is arriving at a place of forgiveness. And forgiveness is one of these things that has a lot of different meanings. I mean, there's certainly spiritual connotations to the idea of forgiveness. I think that forgiveness can be found through the lens of growth. Certainly forgiveness for oneself, being able to acknowledge the difference between who you were and who you are now is a path to forgiveness through growth. Similarly, being able to see people as they were in the past and the mistakes that they have made through a more compassionate lens is a path to forgiveness. And also, I think on a very basic level, forgiveness can also be a choice. I say that with some trepidation because I don't think that you can leapfrog over all of the other working through parts and just arrive at this place of forgiveness and be able to let it go, which I know is out of alignment with many fantasies that people have around the way this actually looks. So, we all have to do the work. We have to go through the anger. We have to find our way to compassion. We have to find our way to validation and atonement and growth and at the end of it all, once we have done the work of processing anger, then we have the right, I think, to claim forgiveness. And forgiveness is certainly not, saying, oh, it's fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. It's okay. Not forgiving, meaning that it wasn't important. But forgiveness in the sense of recognition that continuing to be actively angry is hurting you. It is not hurting the person that harmed you. And using forgiveness as a tool for you, for self-love and self-compassion and self-care, that for you to move into a state of forgiveness is what you need ultimately. So you're not forgiving them. You are practicing forgiveness for your own benefit. And I know that that is not like the spiritual way of thinking about forgiveness, but it's a psychological way of thinking about forgiveness that is often more helpful to people who have been harmed by others in the past. Just a recognition that you can't be angry enough to hurt them in any meaningful way, and that you being in a state of forgiveness is really all about you, as it should be. And also that forgiveness, I think, in its most fundamental sense, is this decision that you have, the debt has been expunged. You know, and let me say a little bit more about that, because I think that one of the reasons why anger can persist is that it's almost like there was a debt, right? Somebody borrowed $1,000 from you. They promised they'd pay it back, whatever. And there was some kind of a betrayal. And of course, this can take many options, but let's say it's about money. And so for you to cultivate forgiveness means making the decision that the debt has been paid, that through your generosity and magnanimity, the debt is expunged. You have crossed it off your books. Godspeed to them. Take that $1,000 and hope it helps. But I no longer seek to collect that debt. And of course, that debt can be financial, but I think emotionally, to consider the debt that anger is saying wants to be repaid. For some, the debt is in the form of atonement. For some, the debt is justice. For some, material justice. For some people, the debt is to have that wrong righted somehow. Or others, the debt is in the form of hoping that their hurt would be acknowledged and validated somehow by the person who did that, or that the other person would even care, right? That's the thing that anger is saying that it wants completion for. And so moving into a state of forgiveness is saying that I acknowledge that I will not be receiving that from you or anything else that will make this materially better. And I no longer expect for that to happen. So away with you. I'm going to be getting on with my life now, and I am no longer going to put my time and energy, energetically, psychologically, emotionally, trying to figure out how to get anything else from this. So, yeah. So I know that that's a little bit different of a way to think about forgiveness, but I hope that it helps you. And if you have been holding on to anger in any of its forms, I do sincerely hope that these ideas will assist you in your healing process. I know that it's not the alpha and the omega, because just hearing me talk about it is not the same thing as having the experience, but I hope that it provides you with direction that you can use to create the experiences that you ultimately need to heal. You deserve it. All right, so that's all for now. We're going to go out with some more sunshine and think about the lightness and freeness that comes with a peaceful heart. I will hope that for you, and I'll be back in touch next time with another episode of the podcast.
Stars guiding us through dark nights, past the raging river at the ford, through the desert and the cactus sunshine in. But you had